In this lab, you will learn how to monitor the network using an Aruba UXI sensor. Aruba UXI sensors continuously test network services as well as internal and external applications. Then they can generate alerts when issues are detected. In the first task, you'll become familiar with the lab environment, the topology it's used, as well as the configuration that the wireless network is using. In the second task, you will start by onboarding the sensor, and then you will complete the initial setup of the UXI customer environment. You will configure the sensor to log into a corporate wireless LAN based on 802.1x, a pre-shared key wireless LAN, as well as test a wired network. In the third task, you will integrate the UXI dashboard with Aruba Central. This integration provides visibility of the UXI status in the Aruba Central dashboard. In task 1, let's examine the lab topology that's used, as well as the configuration that was predefined in Aruba Central. My screen currently shows the topology that we're going to use for this lab demonstration. This is the same lab topology used in the IACA class. Most of the devices that are shown here are already pre-configured for us. You notice the UXI sensor down here at the bottom left is connected to port 4 of the Edge 1 switch. We're going to use PC1 to test connectivity for wireless. We have two wireless LAN set up, one that uses 802.1x and another that uses pre-shared keys. And that connectivity is going to be to AP1, which is connected to the same switch. This AP is set up in bridge mode. Let's take a closer look at the two wireless LANs by switching over to Aruba Central. I'm going to switch tabs here. And let's go into the Campus Wi-Fi UI group. And let's select devices. You can see here there's one access point. And let's click config and take a look at our two wireless LANs. We have an employee wireless LAN as well as a pre-shared key wireless LAN. Let's go ahead and edit the employee wireless LAN, which is using 802.1x. We can see the SSID. It's being advertised on both radios. If we look at the VLAN assignment, it's VLAN 11. 11 is used for bridged employee traffic. If we look at the security, it's a WPA2 Enterprise, and we can see the server it's being used, which if we go back to the topology here fairly quickly, we can see that's this server over here, 10.254.1.23. It's a ClearPass server. If we look at the access, in a production environment, obviously you would define restricted access based on the employee's requirements or needs. In this case here, we're just demonstrating the use of the sensor, so the wireless LAN allows unrestricted access. Let's take a look at the other wireless LAN. The one that uses pre-shared keys. Let's go ahead and edit that. We can see the name of the SSID. See it's enabled on both radios. If we go to VLANs, we can see it's assigned to the same VLAN. Again, in a production network, I would assume that 802.1x would be in one VLAN. Pre-shared keys would be in another VLAN. But again, this is a test environment. We're just illustrating that the sensor can actually monitor different kinds of wireless LANs. If we look at the security, we can see it's WPA3 personal, and we can see the pre-shared key down here. And the access is the same. It's unrestricted. Again, on a production network, you would define restrictions based on what the device or user would need. Again, for demonstration purposes, all we're interested in is that the sensor can log into these wireless LANs and monitor and test them. So those are the wireless LANs we have set up. And let's just test connectivity. We're going to go to PC1's desktop. And let's go ahead and connect to a wireless LAN. We'll connect to the employee one first. I've already done this before, so it's already remembered username and password. So it's connected. Let's make sure it has an address in VLAN 11. IP config, there we go, 10.1.11.50. So it looks like it's connected. That looks good. Let's just check and clear pass. The actual access. And this is probably timed out, so I'm going to go ahead and log back out. And we'll log back in. Okay, let's go to access tracker. Under monitoring. And there's our access right there. We can see the username was employee. And it was Peep. And we can see the Aruba user role is assigned, but we set up the wireless LAN as unrestricted without any role processing. So it's basically ignoring that. Let's go ahead and test the pre-shared key network. So let's go back to our test device, PC1. And let's disconnect from this wireless LAN. And connect to our pre-shared key wireless LAN. There we go. Got a connection. Let's take a look. Do we get an address in VLAN 11? Yes, we did. And to verify this, since we're using pre-shared keys, let's go to the access point. Let's go ahead and take a look at the users, show clients, and we can see the PC is connected. And we can see the SSID pre-shared keys. Excellent. So that's a basic setup that we'll be using and that the UXI sensor is going to be monitoring. In task 2, we'll verify the connection of the UXI sensor to the Edge 1 switch on port 114. In the next section of the lab of this task, you will configure the UXI sensor using the UXI dashboard. When configuring the UXI sensor, we will add a wireless and wired test that'll be performed by the sensor. Let's start with Edge 1's configuration. So I'm in a lab topology. I'll go ahead and access the console of Edge 1. There we go. And let's take a look at the configuration of interface 114, which we can see over here. 114 is the interface that the UXI sensor is connected to. Show run interface 114. We can see the interface is enabled. It's a layer 2 interface, and it belongs to VLAN 24. It looks good. And let's see if we can see the sensor off this interface. Show MAC address table. Show MAC address. Interface 114. And there we go. There is the MAC address of the sensor. Notice it ends in 42 for the MAC address. That's going to be important because at this point, the sensor should have an IP address. It should be able to connect to the internet, and it should already be talking to the Cape Networks Aruba's UXI dashboard. We'll just need to provision the sensor from the cloud. So let's go ahead and log into the cloud. Actually have a URL set up, dashboard.capenetworks.com/login. And wants us to log in. The way this is set up, it's actually the same credentials that I'm using for Central using the single sign-on process. So we'll just click continue here for the username that I've already entered. We can see it's going to do the single sign-on process. And we're at the welcome screen. So that's good. Let's go ahead and click the Set Up My Sensor button to start the process. Let's go ahead and close this down here. So notice the MAC address ends in 42. And if we look at the entire MAC address here, begins with 204C. If we go back here to the switch, 204C, 03, 9C, 2D, 03, 9C, 2D, 42. There we go. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and click Next. And it's going to ask us to set up an SSID. Now, it should auto-sense the SSIDs that are out there if the sensor has been up a long enough time, which we can see. It can actually see quite a few SSIDs. Periodically rescans these. So if you don't see, if you just added your SSID, you don't see it there. There is a custom option, but let's see if our SSID is there. P38T09. There we go. Employee. So it sees it. Actually, it listed as good, but it doesn't know how to connect to it yet. So we're going to select it. It is an enterprise network. It is 201X. We're not using certificates. It is doing PEEP, so it's PEEP password based. What's the phase 2 authentication? This is set up for MS Chat version 2. And let's go ahead and put the username, which is employee, and the password, Aruba123 exclamation point. Let's just double check it. Looks good. And let's go ahead and click add. From this screen, you have to select 3 services to proceed. It can be any 3 services, even ones that you're not using, but 3 do have to be selected, otherwise we can't proceed. So I'm just going to pick 3 simple ones like Dropbox and Facebook and Google. Again, it doesn't really matter what services you want to test. If you want to add more than 3, you can do that. If you're not using these 3, we can always go in after this wizard process has completed and remove the ones we have no interest in. Then we'll click Ready to Test. There we go. If you want to share this dashboard with other people, you can add other accounts. We're not going to do that. We're going to use an account that is built in. And then we're going to go ahead and click Next. And it says Setup's complete. Go to the dashboard. There we go. Now, it might take a few seconds or minutes to see the status of the services. Like right now, we can see it has tested the Wi-Fi network, but it has not tested the external networks, but you have to give it some time, which is fine at this point. At this point, we're going to go ahead and add some additional tests. Remember, the sensor can have up to 4 tests, 3 wireless, and 1 wired, and you must test at least 1 wireless network. And there can be any combination after that. So let us go ahead and we're going to go up here to the top right, and you see these 3 dots. We'll click this and we'll go to settings. And we have some options over here. You can add wireless networks. We're going to do that a little bit later. We're going to start with a wired network. So we're going to click wired. And we'll go ahead and click on add network. We're going to give it a descriptive name. Call it campus wired. If the sensor, because the sensor is testing the connectivity off its Ethernet port, if the sensor is connected to the switch and the switch is doing some kind of authentication, like Editor.1x, you can select enterprise and put the information in here. In this case here, there is no security check by the Edge 1 switch. So we'll click on Add. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is bind a test, or the test in this case, since we have two, to the sensor. So we're going to navigate to Locations. See that over here on the left-hand side. And we're going to go to Sensors and Agents. There we go. And we're going to take a look at what is configured here. You can see what's configured. We have the sensor. We're going to go ahead and edit it. You can change its name by default. That's the serial number of the sensor. The one thing that we do want to enable is the testing. Enable multiple networks. It tells us it's going to test one or more network SSIDs and or Ethernet-based networks, up to 4. We'll click on Enable. There we go. It has the wireless network selected. And we're going to go ahead and select the wired network. And then we're going to save it. There we go. So the nice thing about this is that if you have different parts of your campus, maybe different SSIDs, different wired networks, you can configure them differently and then associate the ones that are necessary for like a particular sensor or sensors. Let's go ahead and add another wireless network since we have a pre-shared key wireless network. Let's go to wireless, and we're going to add a network. And we'll use a drop-down selector to select an existing one, P38 T9 PSK. You can change the name here as far as what is displayed in the UXI dashboard. We're going to default it to the name that we see here. And it is a pre-shared key network. It actually detected that, so it highlighted passphrase. And we need to put in the passphrase that's used for this network. Let's just make sure I put the key in correctly. It looks good. And we'll click on Add. Now, even though I've added this, it does not mean the sensor is monitoring it. And second, you can also see here, it hasn't really connected to it yet, which that's okay. It might take a minute or so for the test. But before we see that, we first have to associate this wireless network to the sensor. So let's go to Locations, Sensors, and let's go ahead and edit our sensor. Let's add a wireless network. Let's add the pre-shared key network. And we'll go ahead and save this. So you can see adding wired and wireless networks is fairly easy. If you recall, like when we ran the wizard and the initialization of the sensor, one of the things you had to select was services. So let's talk about how you can see the services, manage the services, and the tests that are done. So that is done over here from a settings section under the testing subsection. You select service and app tests, and you can see the 3 that we selected. Like I said, if you're not using one of these, like maybe since the wizard does require 3, maybe you chose Dropbox and you're not interested in Dropbox, you can delete it. And then you can easily add another one. External tests are ones that are predefined. You can see the external cloud or web resources that you can test access to. Let's talk about internal. Internal is a method where you can define an internal resource that the sensor is going to test. In this case here, we're going to test access to this DNS DHCP server in our lab topology. So we're assign internal, and as far as the template type, we're going to choose custom. And what kind of test do we want to do? In this case here, it's going to be a web server test. We have different kind of tests. We can do iPerf, Telnet, not that you should be using Telnet, VoIP, etc. We have web services set up on this DNS DHCP server. Let's go ahead and give it a descriptive name. Web server isn't a very descriptive name, so we'll just call it AD because it's also an Active Directory server that the ClearPath server in the topology utilizes. That server performs a lot of functions: Active Directory, web, DHCP, DNS. And then we need either a fully qualified domain name. In this case here, we're just going to put the IP address in of what we want to test. The way this is set up, there's different kinds of web connections it can test: clear text, HTTPS. In this case here, the server is not set up for HTTPS, so that test would fail, so we're going to disable it. Likewise, since we're disabling TLS, it makes sense to turn off the certificate validation part. There's other options you can put in here as far as like the frequency and rate limiting. We're going to leave them at the defaults. So we'll go ahead and click add to add this. So we see the one internal and the two external services that are left. So as you can see here, it's not that hard to actually set up the sensor to do tests. And that finishes task 2. In task 3, we will set up the integration between the UXI dashboard and Aruba Central. The goal of this integration is to have visibility of the sensor's data within Aruba Central's dashboard screen. Note that it could take several minutes to several hours after configuring the integration before the data is visible within Aruba Central. This task, however, is primarily going to focus on the configuration. And then I'll pause the video and then resume it once we get the information or start seeing the information in Central. So currently you see the dashboard for the UXI sensors that you're monitoring. In this case here, we can see there's one sensor, and we can see the services monitoring, which we put our mouse over Wi-Fi. We can see the two SSIDs or pre-shared keys, added to 1X. We can see the one internal network that it's testing and the two external networks, Facebook and Google. So things look good. Let's talk about how to set up the UXI sensors integration with Aruba Central. So first off, we're going to have to go back into settings. Then under the account section, we want to go to integrations over here in the left-hand side navigation pane. You can see that in this lab topology, it's actually already set up as far as the connectivity. The mapping's complete. And that's because this is a lab environment, and this lab is pretty much used every week. So this sensor has already been integrated with Central by a previous student. So let us go ahead and delete this. There we go. And so normally this is what you would see. Brand new sensor. It's not connected to Aruba Central. So let's click on the button that says link the Central account. So we're going to have to put some information here. So let's talk about what we're going to need. Let's start first by pulling some information from Central. Okay, so what do we need from central? As you notice here, there's a central client ID, there's a secret that we need, and a token, and then a URL. So let us go over to central. So I'm already logged in here. Let's go to global, scroll down here to organization, and select the platform integration. And under the API gateway section, we want to select the REST API. There we go. So there's some things we're going to have to save here. So I'm going to open up Notepad real quickly. There we go. There's Notepad. I'm going to just move it over here to a different screen for a few seconds. And the first thing we're going to need is this URL. So let's copy that. And I'm going to put that in Notepad. Move that out of the way. So that's the first thing. The second thing we're going to need is token information as well as a secret. So let's go to System Apps and Tokens. You can see there's actually one here already from a previous configuration. So let's go ahead and delete that. We're going to add our own. It's probably from the student that used this last. And let's go ahead and click on Add Apps and Tokens. Let's give it a name. Call it capital UXI. And we'll click Generate. There we go. So some things that we're going to need here. First off, I'm going to expand these columns so we can see everything. For the UXI, we need that client ID. So let's copy that. Let's go back over here to Notepad. There's a client ID. And then we also need the secret. Can expand this column so we can actually see the whole thing. For the UXI, here's the secret. Let's copy that. There we go. I think we're good. We're going to leave this screen open here because we might need to come back to it. And oh, we have one more thing that we need. We need the token. So at the bottom of the screen here, let's select the option to download the token. Now, depending on your web browser, will affect what's going to happen here. Like within, I'm using Chrome, so it's popping this up. So let's just go ahead and save this. I'm going to save it to my desktop. We'll let it default to that name. But depending on your browser, you might not even see this little pop-up with the actual information, which is JSON code with the token information. It just might pop up a download option. You just download it directly. We can close that. And let's go back to our UXI configuration. And let's go ahead and fill in this information. So obviously the email address is putting in there is not correct. We need the client ID. That's that string of characters. Then we need a secret, which is this. Let's go back here, put in a secret, and let's click on show just to make sure. Oh, that looks correct. Good, good. And then we need the token. So let's select choose file, and let's go to my desktop. There we go. There's a JSON file. What's the server type? This is definitely in the cloud. It's not an on-premise central solution. And then we need the last thing, which we captured first. We need the URL. There we go. Looks like we have everything. Let's click submit. There we go. Let's give it a few seconds. We can see it's mapping currently in progress. It's trying to connect. There we go. Mapping complete. That's good. It has connectivity to central. So now at this point, the UXI sensor can actually report stuff to Aruba Central. It's like, how can we see that? Well, if we go back to Aruba Central and we go to there we go, overview, the dashboard here. Looks like it's still loading. Give it a few seconds. For any sites that you've set up, it's still loading. There we go. There we go. We got a site. You're going to see it here. As I mentioned earlier, it might take some time for it to appear on the screen. We should actually see it right above AI Insights. We should see network information. We're not seeing that. That could take minutes for the synchronization to take place. It could take an hour or so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video at this point, and then I'm going to resume it once the sensor starts publishing information in Aruba Central. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Well, this time was actually fairly quick. I only had to wait about 3 minutes. So from the Aruba Central dashboard, the overview section, if you put your mouse over the location right here, user experience, everything's good. That means all the tests that are be done by all the sensors for this particular location, they've all passed. This is also a shortcut. So notice I put my mouse over the user experience. The icon changes. That's clickable. And that will take you to the UXI dashboard where we can see the results here. We can see for Wi-Fi, for this, there's only one sensor at this location. We can see that the two SSIDs it's testing. If we put our mouse over Ethernet, the campus wired, tests are successful. For the Active Directory / DHCP / DNS server / web server, we see that connectivity is good. And the two external services, the tests that it's doing, are good. So as you can see here, there's fairly good integration between the two products. To see the actual details of the results of these tests, you do have to be in the UXI dashboard currently. So if there's a problem that the sensor is reporting to Central, you'll see that there's a problem. You'll have to go to this dashboard to see the results. So let's go ahead and click on a Wi-Fi link, and we can see the details. What kind of tests or what kind of information it's gathering. Like we can see like this signal strength. We can see like if there's any frame retries. In this lab environment, depending on how many students you have in class, there could be a lot of interference. So there could be some frame corruption. I'm not doing anything at this point on the channel. I'm the only one on at AP, so obviously it's not busy. We can see the band information for and the BSSID, the association time. And if you have a problem where you're constantly connecting, disconnecting, that could be like a distance issue. You're too far away, or the AP is tuned a little bit incorrectly. Let's go back and let's take a look at the internal test we have, AD. The server in here, we can see information is testing, like the latency, packet loss, jitter, and it's doing an HTTP GET. You can see the information over here, over the different time periods. So you notice I move my mouse. You can see the different time periods where it's doing its respective tests periodically. And this concludes the UXI sensor integration activity and lab.